Behind every amazing flavor is an amazing human who has perfected their craft. Welcome to Flavors Unknown, a behind-the-scenes look at new flavors and the chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders who create them, with your host, Emmanuel.
Hey there, welcome to episode 56 of the Flavors Unknown podcast. Today my guest is Chef Lamar Moore, who's just opened the Steakhouse Bugsy and Meyer's in Las Vegas and won the TV cooking competition show Vegas Chef Prizefight on Food Network. We talk about him leaving Chicago, the food scene in Vegas, his role as a mentor to the community of young AfricanAmerican chefs. I am your host, Emmanuel LaRoche, and if you are new to the podcast, I have been in the food industry for more than 20 years, both in Europe and in the US, and every other week, I interview trending chef, pastry chefs, and mixologists around the country. If you are enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to it and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and on Facebook at Flavors Unknown. And you can find the show note from all the episodes on the website flavorsunknown.com. And now, here is my conversation with Chef Lamar Moore. Hi, Chef. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm very good, and I'm very excited to have you on the show Flavors Unknown. I just wanted to start by asking you how are you doing during, this the time of the pandemic, these crazy times that we are living in?
Yeah, it is crazy, and maybe I'm just a tad bit crazier. I am relocated here to Las Vegas, working with Caesars Entertainment at Flamingo Hotel. And we decided to open up a steakhouse during the pandemic a few months back in June.
So are you guys open now?
Yeah, we're open. So we did soft opening on June 18th for 2 weeks. And then we went live for reservations on July 3rd, where we were open 5 days a week. And just up until 2 days ago, now we're open 7 days a week from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay, yeah. So I really appreciate that you find the time to be on the show. I understand that the world is really busy at the moment. It's really interesting that because the steakhouse that you are part of, like the opening with the Caesar group, is in fact the result of you winning food competition show on TV, which from the Food Network, which is the Vegas Chef Prizefight, correct? So can you tell us a little bit about the premise of the show, because it's really different from like other, let's say, cooking competition show that are on TV.
Actually, coincidentally, this time last year, I myself and 7 other chefs from throughout the United States were chosen to compete on the show Food Network's Vegas Chef Prizefight. It was their first season and first ever taking of the show, and the prize was to be the head chef of a renovated $10 million renovation of a new steakhouse in the Flamingo Hotel. It aired early this year from March all the way to the middle of April, which again, the goal was to open up, in April, and then now that changed during the pandemic. So we were here in Las Vegas and taped for 6 weeks. We cooked at a lot of different Caesars properties, and every week we were challenged to also lead the teams, to compete against each other, and to basically be ourselves and show our culinary point of view. And I came out on top. And what's awesome is third time's a charm. It's my third time competing on Food Network, and came out as a winner this time.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you, because you competed in other food shows before. So how was this one different from, beside, of course, obviously the end prize? But how was it different from, the other shows that you have done?
I think like when I go back to Chop, that's kind of, 45 minutes in the moment, you're cooking, you go. And, as chefs, we're taught to think fast on our feet. And so that was kind of my introduction to cooking on TV. And I will say, I had a lot of nervousness and jitters. And what I got asked for was a burger. We'll talk more about burger a little bit later. I kind of fine-tuned my burgers and gotten better at that. And then my second time was Beat Bobby Flay, which coincidentally was last year also. And I felt very comfortable about being on Beat Bobby Flay. I felt comfortable about the food that I put out, and, just couldn't quite edge my competitor, in making some awesome toast, but I felt great about what I did. And when I look at Vegas Chef Prizefight, you're competing on a weekly basis. So you're a little bit more settled in. I've learned to take some of the mistakes I made in the past and not really focus on the camera, but focus on, my culinary point of view and putting out some really, really great food. And my background was able to precede itself and being able to compete, against some of the best chefs in the world, per se. And so, each week I competed on a high level and I was able to get in the heads of a lot of the chefs that I competed against and make sure that I set myself apart from what they did. So that was a lot of the big differences.
What made you say, like, one day, I want to be there, I want to be part of, that adventure on TV? Because not everyone, is compelled to do something like this.
I agree. As a chef, we try to challenge ourselves more and more. I've been in the industry now 21 years. I worked at a lot of different companies, operations, and, I've always watched Chops. So to start with that one, it's always was a dream of mine to be on TV, to cook on TV, to compete. We love to compete with each other. And I felt, why not, if there's an opportunity for me to do it on television? And I try to explain to chefs, competing in the restaurant world and competing on TV are two totally different things. It's being able to, simultaneously control the camera without controlling the camera, per se, meaning, you're just cooking your heart out and enjoying yourselves. And then just being able to show the world that, my culinary talent can definitely withstand the strength of, the rest of the talent throughout the world. And I wanted to be able to showcase my talent on TV, and, the opportunities arise and I continue to stay with it.
Yeah. And I think it's not only about like the food, but as well about like, it's almost like a stage presence, and kind of like a connection with, we can say, like the camera. And I have to say that your wonderful smile translates like very well on TV. So I'm sure a lot of people said that to you.
It's funny. You're absolutely correct. And I'll talk about that real quickly. I never realized that would be something that would be a big part of, my growth on television. But, it did. And we talk about that, from a television standpoint. You start to look at yourself and understand what your culinary point of view is and also your personality. So some of my takeaways from doing Chopped and also Beat by Buffet is that I was able to grow more into myself and really, really be more happy about who I am and to display it on TV. And coincidentally, in between that, non-culinarily, but having some culinary insight, I was on a reality show on Bravo called Welcome to Waverly. And so in those, there was a lot of snippets that showed, me smiling and laughing and giggling and having fun. And, that is the type of person that I am. I find myself as a fun-loving chef and a person. And I like to have great camaraderie in the kitchens and with people. And I'm a huge people person. I like to give back to communities. And, when I did Welcome to Waverly, we were stuck in the middle of nowhere in a community. And so it's just continuously, evolving on who I am as a chef and as a person. So I guess my smile has, prevailed more than what I thought. So I appreciate the love on that.
I think you have two things that you cannot, get rid of, is like your smile and your beard. I think that's part of your signature as a celebrity chef.
So I have to give you a lot of credit. You're doing your homework, and I'll tell you a funny story how that started. Some years ago, I worked in the stadiums and I would travel a lot. I couldn't find any place to get a haircut. And so my beard and my hair grew very long. And I got back to Chicago and I said, let's keep it and see what it looks like. And, when you start TV, there's a rule of thumb where people get used to a certain look. So when you talk about the smile and the beard, that kind of stuck, and I just stuck with it. And like you said, it's like if you look at Guy Fieri, he has the wild blonde hair, like, and that's been his signature. Yep. So, the smile and the beard has become my mantra, and I've stuck with it.
Exactly.
Right. You found a niche,
You found yours. That's pretty good. Yep, absolutely. You have to stick to it. Very good.
Yeah.
I'm in marketing, so I can relate to it. So I think congratulations. I think it's great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's be a bit more serious here at a minute. But so you are, in this phase of like opening this, restaurant, the Steakhouse, Bugsy and Meyer's, correct? Steakhouse in the Flamingo in Las Vegas.
Yes.
So what's your approach when you are starting like a restaurant, a new restaurant from scratch? What are like the important steps? And then I'm guessing as well, how do you go about creating like a new menu? I'm guessing you need to have like the staples from a steakhouse, but you need to bring us as well your own signature. People are expecting this from you. So just curious about the process.
Well, Caesars as a whole, it's collective, inspirations on the menu. I have a great executive chef who's been with the company for over 15 years. I have an exec sous who's very talented and has been in the industry for over 10 years. Same thing with my sous chef. And to your point, I mean, it used to be a steakhouse, in place of where Bugsy and Myers is called Center Cut. And so very, very old school. If you look at the hotel, it's very old school. And my general manager, he has a saying, which I think is so funny and cliche. He said, now we have a Ferrari in an old garage. And so a lot of us culinarily, we're different and the same. And we have a lot of the classics, you would think on the steak, obviously a New York strip. You have a ribeye, 16, 20 ounce. We do bone in, bone out. We have a dry aging cage, which is synonymous to what we do. And so in planning the menu, we wanted to have a steakhouse, but we want to be very different from everyone else. Obviously, everyone has steak Oscar, which is, the béarnaise, with the crab on top. But then we do things where we add some coolness to it. Like I love, and if you look on the show, the first episode, I did, Cajun ribeye. So my Cajun spice is offered on the steaks if people want it black on occasion. So that gives a little bit more of my feel to that. We have what we call steak enhancements, with the steak Oscar, where I have one which I enjoy bacon and eggs, where you can get, a piece of rye toast. You have our pork belly or bacon is hung in our dry aging, so it's dry aged. We slice it, we sear it in the pan, and we add a little bit of bourbon maple syrup to it and a sunny egg.
Nice.
And I love bourbon. People that know me know that I really enjoy bourbon and cigars. And, why not have some bourbon and maple and a little bit of egg on top? We obviously offer foie gras, which is, some people, that know about it, they enjoy it. And so from the menu planning, it's, adding to some of the old history, into what Flamingo is about and what Las Vegas is about, along with Caesars Entertainment, but then being able to do some fun and cool things on the menu. Like one of our advertisers I really love, we do a coconut shrimp. I love sweet and spicy. It has a coconut sambal in there, which has some spicy notes in there, some toasted coconut on there as well, a little bit of lime and a honeydew and daikon salad right on the side. So it's having some versatility on the menu. Obviously, you go to a seafood steakhouse, they have crab cakes. We make our crab cakes in house. One of our secret ingredients in there is most of the time when you're making crab cakes, it has raw egg. We actually put a boiled egg in there. We don't use a lot of binder and have a nice fennel slaw on the side. And it's become one of our, more popular items. When we thought macaroni and cheese, of course, we have to have lobster mac and cheese. And I have to say that our lobster mac and cheese is divine. I think it's really, really good. And it definitely
stands. What is your twist on the lobster mac and cheese?
So our twist is we use a lot of lobster tail meat in there. Our pasta is tubetti. So tubetti is like little small tubes. And we add a touch of our lobster bisque in there too to give more of a rich flavor.
I mean, you had me already when you talk about foie gras, being French, I love foie gras. And then bourbon. So yeah, that's my favorite whiskey as well. So do you have any favorites in bourbon? What's your go-to?
Oh, yeah. So I have two. I really love Bullet and I really love Angel's Envy. Those are like my top two favorites. I like to smoke a cigar. I mean, today's my off day. I'll probably, having a cigar later. I love Cohibas. They're really, really, nice and relaxed.
Sure.
And, I can dip the end of my cigar in one of those. And, if I want to go a little bit of sweet, I'll add a little bit of Grand Marnier on there too and, enjoy it.
So next time in Vegas, I know where I need to knock on the door. So we have a bourbon together.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
How does it feel for you to leave Chicago? Because that's your hometown, correct? You're from Chicago. I know you've been all over the place and so on, but you've been there. So now you're going to Vegas. So how does it feel?
Chicago is obviously, to your point, is very bittersweet. Chicago is my home. 90% of my family in Chicago and friends. And, over the last, 7 years, I've become to be a big part of the culinary scene in Chicago. So, it's, difficult to leave Chicago, but I'm always up for a challenge too. And, when you get an opportunity to go to a different city and make a mark and it's nothing like Vegas, to be able to do that, I was excited about the challenge and the opportunity. Do I miss Chicago and my friends? Absolutely, 100%. But I have an opportunity here to do something cool and different. And once the dust settles, especially hopefully God, soon we'll get past, COVID, visiting Chicago, being more on the radar and, doing some cool, fun events with a lot of my chefs and friends and cooking out, having some cookouts with my family and, inviting some of my family out here. A lot of my family hasn't been out here yet from Chicago too. So, to be able to experience Vegas very, very differently, it's been a chore.
Sure. Yeah, maybe do some collaboration with Chicago chefs in your steakhouse too in Vegas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is on the radar.
How would you describe like the Vegas scene and, from a culinary dining scene standpoint, and how is it different from Chicago?
Well, I'll tell you a few things. One that I appreciate, especially being a chef and working a lot of hours, I would have thought that I could go and enjoy fine dining food, and I'll go even higher, a steakhouse, after 1 o'clock in the morning. And I don't know the parent company, but I go frequently to the point I go almost once a week. So they have two concepts. One is called Herbs and Rye, and the other one is called Cleaver. And it's a steakhouse and a bar. And I think that they're geared for people that are in the industry. And you can walk into that place like you walk into my restaurant and sit down and have great service, great cocktails and drinks, and steak and seafood on their menu. And if I add, after 12 a.m., they have happy hour. So you can go in, for example, I love a 16-ounce ribeye. A regular price on the menu is $67, and it's half off. So
that's cool.
I think that you can't do that in Chicago. And I find so many places where I'm comfortable, where I can get off work at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And if I want to be taken care of greatly, I can. If I want to go to a bar, there are a few local bars close to where I live, and I can go and have great drinks and sit in front of the TV and, check up on my sports and, have a great meal at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3, 4, 5, who cares? There's a lot of places like that here in Las Vegas that you don't have in Chicago. So, I'm very appreciative of that, because then I don't, necessarily miss out on those opportunities.
And what you are talking about, it's probably outside of the Strip, correct? It will be other parts of Vegas.
Interestingly enough, both of their locations, if you were staying on the Strip in one of the hotels, it's like a 10-minute Uber ride to both places. So it's not that far off the Strip, which is even cooler.
Cool. Let's go back in time, and curious about how did you get started and what compelled you to become a chef?
It's a twofold. So I grew up around my grandmother a lot because my mom worked, and I saw my grandmother cooking all the time. She cooked for us. She cooked for people that couldn't cook for themselves. So I got to see her cook food for us as a family, and I got to see her help people that, needed a hand or needed a meal. And so I kind of took on that echelon. And actually, from both my grandmothers, I took a lot of their recipes and honed them. Even to this day, I have them, and I've utilized them on the menus. And it gave me an opportunity to help communities and friends and people. I never would have thought that I would take on that, but I think, a lot of it is, embedded in my heart. And I, took the journey of going to culinary school. My grandmother pushed me to do it when I was a kid, and so did my mom. I was able to not only cook as a chef and as a cook, but also to help communities. When I moved to California back in 2003, man, that seems so long ago. And I started helping companies, do charity events, cooking for kids, helping the communities that we worked in and that I lived in. And as I got older and I moved back to Chicago in 2009, I continued that same spirit of giving back to local communities, having partnerships with local grocery stores like Mariano's. I've done immense amount of things with them in the communities and giving back, local churches, chef peers. I have a buddy in Chicago, Chef Eric Williams, who owns Virtue. And he came up with a great idea. I think it was a few years ago. He's like, "Hey, chef, I grew up on the west side of Chicago, and I have this area that, you're probably familiar with Garfield Park. And for Father's Day, I just want to do a cookout. I don't want to charge anybody. I just want to get together. Again, I call Mariano's. They donated some product. We threw down some ribs, all different types of cakes and pies and fruit. And it was just a really good time and really good, awesome thing to see, in the communities in the neighborhood. And then now, flash forward up until this year, when you think about, the pandemic, to be able to do some of the same things, but very differently. I work with World City Kitchen, where working with a local restaurant group in 50/50, I've known those guys since they had one restaurant. And it was an opportunity for me to help the communities, to help the frontline workers, but also to help these partners to be able to, rehire more staff and to push out meals out of one of their newest operations. And we work collaboratively as a team to be able to push out meals for everybody. I mean, from the communities, every day they were feeding unemployed restaurant workers. They just show their ID and then come and get a meal. It was awesome. Getting product from companies like Cisco and some other dairy companies where, they, obviously they were sitting on product because the restaurants were closed down, and, getting donations to be able to feed as many people as possible, feeding homeless people, anybody that needed a meal. That's something that I watched my grandmother do when I was a kid. She would, drive down the street, and if we had meals left over from church, she would go and give meals away, doing community drives for Thanksgiving and handing out turkeys in past companies that I would work with. So, it's so important to me as a person and as a chef to give back to communities, and I do it through food.
Yeah. Okay. So your grandmother or your grandmothers, were, your first mentors almost. So who were some of your other mentors, like more in the industry, and what are like the biggest lessons that you have learned from them?
One of my biggest ones, his name was Shea Michael Robinson. He was a chef that took me under his wing when I relocated from Chicago to San Jose, California. And I was very young at that time. I think I just turned 21. And we talked about a lot of my aspirations and goals. And I can tell you that everything that I sought out to do, he was right there to guide me, not only as a chef, but also as a person. And, the other piece to that is, as I was coming up in the industry, I worked for a lot of different companies. As a younger culinarian, I didn't see a lot of African American chefs either. So that was kind of some, hesitancy there for me to really, really cultivate and grow. He was able to help hone in my skill again as a person, as a chef. And when I moved out to Chicago, another chef, gosh, I can't think of his name, it'll come to mind, when I worked in the stadiums. I used to work for the Bears. He was kind of the same. Oh, Mark Angeles. He was the same exact way. He saw a lot aggression and aptitude of me wanting to get back and mentor and help. And he was instrumental in me, being able to mentor a lot of students and kids throughout the stadium, because the stadium is, large. We would cook for 65, 70,000 people. And throughout the week, I was responsible for a minimum of 100 mentees that we would spread throughout the stadium. And he and I would help, judge a lot of competitions. We would hire a lot of the students. We would mentor them. And I say, here we are years later, a lot of my mentees are now, executive chefs for operations. One of my older
That's
mentees,
great.
she's now the chef de cuisine for the Chicago Bears. And I remember 10 years ago when she was just an intern. And so that's what this industry is about. And I've had people that mentor me, and it's important for me to continue to echelon through other people.
I mean, you mentioned something about, African American chef, and I was shocked, when I was looking at, building, the different topics for our discussion, that, there's less than 18% of chefs that are African American. I read something that you said that we have to work twice as hard just to keep up, and 3 times as hard to earn the opportunity. In the day and nowadays and age, it's really shocking for me. Saying that African American chef, don't get the same opportunities as others. I mean, it's nothing new, unfortunately. Do you think that things are slightly evolving, or there's still a lot of room, for growth, in the restaurant industry?
I believe there's still a lot of room. I was just talking to a writer a few weeks back, and she was expressing to me, and this is a writer in Chicago, about a young culinarian who experienced some hardships. And I think this chef's 24, 25. And it blew me away. I'm, almost 40. And here we are with a young culinarian at 24, 25 that is facing things that I faced when I was 21, 22. And I think that, the curve is still very difficult. One thing I will say in a bright note that I'm excited about, as I have, continued my culinary journey, that I have found more African American chefs than I would have thought in my entire career. And the fact that there are a lot out there, it's just having a voice and a sound, for ourselves to be known for who we are, and cultively for what we do. I'll go even further, and I could be wrong on this. I'm still studying and looking. I think that in my position here in Las Vegas, I think I'm the only one on the entire strip.
Oh, wow.
And I could be wrong, but as I get more, embedded into the communities, into the restaurants, I think that I'm the only one. There was a chef here by the name of Jeff Henderson. I know he worked for Caesars in the past and some other operations, and I know he's here. Don't know exactly, where he is, in cahoots to Las Vegas restaurants and casinos and hotels, but I don't think there's any others.
Do you have like a role model, when it comes to, African American chef in the US?
Absolutely. One of my favorite chefs is Marcus Samuelsson. I've studied his career back when he was with Aquavit, up until the point of where he is with Red Rooster and his other operations. I've, visited Red Rooster in New York quite a few times. I've met him once. I love his cookbook. I love what he does for the community. I watch how he brings up other chefs throughout, his teams and his operations. And, I watch what he does on TV too, which I think is great. His documentaries between, PBS and what he does for BuzzFeed, I think is super awesome. He's very, very calm and collect, and he's very, very culinarily sound, and I model myself after him. I think he does great for our communities and our people.
Do you think that's your, status of celebrity chefs, that you have acquired now, and your recent victory at, at the chef Prizefight? Do you feel that it give even more like empower you to show, example, of Black excellence to like a younger generation of African American chef or cooks, or even in general? I have to say.
I'd say in general and with African American chefs. Again, to win something is a different pat on the back. To work hard at it. I'm grateful for the losses because it pushed me for the win. I love my time on Chop. I learned from that. I love my time on Beat by Flay. I learned from that. I love being on Bravo. I learned from that. I faced some racism, being in a small town city on the Bravo show. And I took that chance to be on that show to be a part of my personality and a part of a community that I didn't know anything about and to accept a challenge. And I think that, the more of, what I'm able to do professionally and on TV and in the articles, it helps, definitely young African Americans and older African Americans and people in general show that, even when you're faced with adversity, there's an opportunity where with hard work meets, destiny and you can definitely be on top. When I look at, Vegas Chef Prizefight, there is a point where, and I think when I meet a lot of people, when we talk about the show, you could see the momentum, push. And there was a lot of different things that I had to do to make that push. And I'll give it an example. One being in Vegas, it doesn't take long to get sucked in Vegas, very, very quickly. We taped an average of 12 to 16 hours a day. That's about how an average chef's time to work. Now you add in the TV aspect of it, where there's a lot of waiting, there's a lot of cooking, there's a lot of talking, and you have to take care of yourself and your body in order to compete on a high level on a weekly basis. And I quarantined myself to be able to, withstand any and everything that came at my way because you are anxious, you're excited, there's a lot of unknown, and you're competing on a high level. And for lack of a better word, you don't want to make a fool out of yourself or your family on TV either. So you're trying to, constantly go at it at 100%, if not 200, because you're aiming to win and you're aiming for a prize to be able to, to particularly change your life. And you want other people, to be able to model behind that. So, yeah, I think it's super important and has definitely, paved the way for other people.
Do you have one or two advice for a young African American chefs?
I have two. The first one is don't be afraid to share information. I talk to a lot of my chef peers and we talk as much as we can on a daily basis, a weekly basis through our busy lives, and we share information. What I mean by that is just because we operate separate businesses doesn't mean that we can't help each other grow, because in order to grow, your community has to be strong and your community base within each other has to be strong too. The other thing is, put your head down and work hard. A lot of chefs, a lot of young culinarians, when it gets tough, we shy away from hard work. There's a lot of things that I don't want to do that I have to do. There's a lot of things that I don't want to do that I need to do. And there's a lot of things that I don't want to do that I must do. And having some balance in your life, meaning, it's great to drive and work hard in a restaurant, but make sure that you take time for yourself. So, you don't go, for lack of a word, AWOL. You see a lot of chefs are losing their emotional equilibrium and, stay close to your family and your friends and find that time to be able to vent when necessary, because if not, it becomes bottled up. And what we don't realize, our body is one temple. And if we're constantly bottling up those anger and frustrations and we're working hard all day, our body starts to wear down and so does our mind.
Looking back at your career, you have traveled in different parts, of the world. You have been in Europe, Greece, you have been to South America, in Peru. Of course, you travel throughout the United States. And I'm just want to know a little bit about how did these experiences influence your cooking style?
I like meeting different people. Let's start with that. Everyone's different. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a background. You get to learn. And to quite honestly, one of the biggest things I take away from that is the continuous respect of the craft, the food, and the people. I'll go one that is still endear to my heart. And we talk about, working with the Peruvians. I mean, probably some of the most aggressive chefs I have met in my entire career. But I have the most immense respect for them because they come in every day, they work hard, they're very into themselves and their craft and their food and where they come from. When I look at how we curated the menu, so I was the opening executive sous chef for Tanta, which is ran by Gaston Curio in Chicago. And so learning about their food and their culture and where they come from and their families and things like that, it made me feel like I was at home with my own food, but then living through their food and how they treat their food and their families. And probably some of the best ceviche I had in my entire life, but they do it very, very differently. And it's that sense of pride that I think sometimes we forget, to be able to curate and do. And when I look at my travels during the stadiums, our job was to create a menu that was locally with that stadium and to learn more about where the food and the culture comes from and to take pride into what someone cultivated way before I was born is super awesome. And so when I look at my career now and having, a well-rounded experience, so like when you talk about the menu of Bugsy and Myers, my executive sous chef worked for, he used to work at Haleo for Jose Andres. And so when you look at the ceviche, as a ceviche on the menu, it's a scallop ceviche and it's so Latin inspired. And so the collaboration on that, it has a nice feel of what we both know and what we kind of grew learning through our culture from other cultures and companies. So, you grow a different appreciation for a lot of things like that. When you talk about Europe, I grew up on red beans and rice, and on the show, on the show of Vegas Chef Prizefight, when I started to compete, I started to make things that I grew up learning from my grandmother, and then things I learned from my travels. So I grew up on black eyed peas, so I made a flageolet
Yeah.
of black eyed peas with pork
Yeah,
because it was a twist on what I did, on what I learned, but it's still
sure.
homage to what I know.
Exactly. Yeah, cool. So you're saying the ceviche that you have tasted in Peru is very different. So how different is it?
One of the first differences, they don't say ceviche with a V, they say ceviche with a B.
Sure.
Most ceviches are curated with a lot of lime to cook the ceviche, where with the Peruvians, they make what they call a leche de tigre, which is the milk of a tiger. And that is a combination of ice, fresh lime juice, habanero, cilantro, and the bulbs of a red onion. So you get the white part. And so when it's all blended together, and then usually some white fish, something like a flounder or halibut that gets blended in with it. And we would use the fluke trim, and then blend that and then strain it. And that was the base for the ceviche. And obviously a lot of salt. And so the Peruvians live in the moment. So nothing is marinated, the day before, hours before. That ceviche gets tossed, day of or to order. And then there's
Oh,
more of a
wow.
squeeze of lime juice in there and habanero and some thinly sliced red onions. And I'm telling you, like I would eat ceviche every single day. And
Wow.
that's what I'm saying. When you travel, when you work, you become a part of that culture and that family.
Almost like the flesh of the fish or the shellfish are like really slightly, I would say, in brackets, like cooked, with the citrus then. Because I've
Absolutely.
seen some recipes where, as you're right, that usually you leave, it's almost like a marinade, and you have like, those shrimps or fish or scallops like staying in the marinade with citrus for a bit longer. That's interesting. So beside travels, do you have other like culinary influences? And of course, your grandmother.
Friends. When I visit, friends' restaurants, we poach off each other. We
Mm-hmm.
look at our
Sure.
menus and our sets, and we you don't exactly make their recipe, but then you're like, wow. So I give an example again, going back to my friend in Chicago, Eric. When he was working on his restaurant, he and I was working on his recipes, and I love pimento cheese. And so let's talk really quickly, about a burger, and that burger you can find online. I wanted to make a really good burger, and so I made a pimento cheeseburger. Now, obviously, I taken out the time to make pimento cheese. You can find pimento cheese in your local store. I love a really nice soft brioche bun. I made house-made pickles that's got some salty, sweet notes, and pimento cheese, what I call the caviar of the South. And so Chef Eric wanted to put a pimento cheese platter, on his menu with, little small biscuits and also cornbread. And so we compared our pimento cheese. With mine, I took my experience in working in a barbecue restaurant and I wanted some smoky notes in there. And so I added, smoked jalapenos along with the pimentos to give it a little bit more of a smoky flavor. And because I'm about the triple B, beer, bourbon, and barbecue. So from time to time, I may switch up the recipe and I'll throw some beer in there, almost make a beer cheese, to add different flavoring. And where I got that from is that pimento cheese originated in Louisville. And in my travels, again, I love bourbon. I went to a bourbon bar, and they put some crackers and pimento cheese in front of me, and I didn't know what it was. And the guy was, told me it was complimentary, and I take a sip of bullet, and I started to dig in. I was like, holy cow, this is great. And so I started to study what pimento cheese was, and I'm like, well, I got to have that. And so that became a part of, my menu set and became, indigenously famous for a burger that I created, a year or so ago as a pimento cheeseburger.
So if we talk about the burger and then you know, that would be your suggestions, how like a home cook, a food enthusiast can prepare like a burger being like, Lamar Moore style. That will be something with the pimento cheese. So what would you suggest them to do?
Absolutely. Especially in this time where a lot of people are cooking at home, I prefer, 4-ounce patties because they're super thin, they cook quicker. But, there are some recipes you can find online where I've done what I call like the mama burger, where you go to the store and you buy like the ground beef and ground chuck. You make your own nice patty, sear it in a nice hot pan with just simple salt and pepper because I like to flavor the meat. I like my burger medium. You get a couple slices, some really good cheddar cheese. And, again, if you're not, looking to make pimento cheese, I know Whole Foods has great pimento cheese you can slap on there, and house pickles, maybe some chips and fries on the side and a beer. And I'm telling you, you got some good eating with a classical, easy burger to make at home.
Do you put like a special sauce in the burger? Or
no,
it's
just
enough?
With the pimento cheese, it's super creamy because the pimento cheese has mayo in there. So
Yep.
I don't add anything else in there. So you get the creaminess of the pimento cheese. You get a little bit of bite and saltiness from the pickles. And then you have slices of cheddar on there just to give that extra gooiness. And then you're going to toast the brioche bun with some butter. I mean, who doesn't like butter on a bun? And then you got the fattiness from the burger patties. And I tell a lot of people, if you're a vegan and you want to put, a Boca burger on there or Impossible burger, I used to do that too. That works. If you're into turkey works very, very well. If you're into chicken, you can put a chicken breast on there. You can even do fried chicken on there. I definitely don't mind that. So there's a lot of versatility with that, and that's why I made it, to that level of simplicity, because then you can interchange how you want, to make that burger.
So I would like to dig in a little bit about your creative, approach. So how do you go about creating like a new dish, for a menu? And what's your source of inspiration, first? And then after that, what's the next steps?
Well, first and foremost, I look at, what's local, what's in the grocery stores. We always want to take care of our farmers, what's local and indigenous to an area. Most of the time when I'm creating something, it's something that I really like eating. So like, I love fried chicken. We just tested a menu item with the fried chicken, and actually, coincidentally, it's the fried chicken that kind of helped me propel me to win the show. And it's going to hit the menu here in the next 2 weeks because it's something that, I grew up on. I love a really good fried chicken if it's done right. I love chicken and waffles, and, I do a play on things that I enjoy. We had, Mexican corn on the menu or cream corn, and very similar to what I have in Chicago. In Chicago, when I decided to do Mexican corn, because we get local Indiana corn, which is super sweet and great, and I think it'll be great on the menu. It reminded me of being in California, and I would get off work at certain times. You see, the little lady with the little cart. She's dipping it in butter, and then the mayo and the cheese and the chile or the tahine and lime. And so I took those same, notes, and I'm like, why not do that here? And I would do it with a twist. Again, I had, barbecue background, so instead of putting tahine, I put my own barbecue spice on there. Just to do something different. So, and a lot of my inspiration too comes from my cooks. You got cooks that work at a lot of different places, and they have a lot of recipes that are embedded into them. And, we make family meal a lot of times that turn into a great, dish. I'll tell you one mistake. A lot of great mistakes, chefs will tell you turn into some of the best recipes. So a couple of years ago, I was working in a stadium and I loved to drink sweet tea, and I would make sweet tea for my team. And so one day we were prepping and I go to drink sweet tea. I get downstairs to my office and I take a sip and I immediately spit it out. The reason why is because someone sabotaged, playing a joke, sabotaged the sweet tea, and they put a lot of salt in it. And I didn't want to throw it away. And I was like, because I got 5 gallons of this. And I was like, you know what? Let me throw a pork loin in here and brine it and see how it comes out. So now I have a recipe for a sweet tea brine pork chop. And that came about
Right, cool.
because of that, which ended up, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I ended up kind of doing the same thing on the show. I brined it with a little bit of sweet tea and, a little pickling spice in there. And now I have sweet tea brine pork chop. So some mistakes come into some of your best recipes.
Okay, Chef, I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure that I'm respectful of yours, and it's your day off. So I know that I am sitting in between, your bourbon and your cigar. So I just want to finish with a series of rapid fire questions, if you're okay with that. Let's say like you and I travel, I'm going to Vegas. And so you and I are going on a tasting tour in Vegas. So what are like and I understand you are recently there. So, but what are like the 5 spots you will take me to?
Definitely got to stop at Bugsy and Meyer Steakhouse. I think that's super important. I love going to Beauty and Essex by Chris Santos and the Tao Group in Cosmo. Haleo is really, really good in the Cosmo as well. Sometimes I have a taste for some really good breakfast and lunch. There's this restaurant called Hex that's absolutely outstanding that I love. There's a Chicago-style restaurant that's in Vegas called Joe's Seafood and Steak that I think is delightful. And then I'm going to go super casual. There's this place called Lolo's Chicken and Waffles that's about 5 minutes from my house. And I go probably once every 2 weeks. And it's super casual and super great. And they do an awesome job with their food.
And if we want to go after that and have a great like bourbon tasting, which bar are you going to bring me to?
If you're doing a bourbon tasting, they actually do cigars and bourbon. I can't think of it right now. It's super awesome, chill. There's another place called Davidoff that's in the Fashion Mall. They have an extensive amount of bourbons, and also they do cigars as well, because to me that goes hand in hand. And there's another place called, I can't think of the name of it, it's in a Tivolo area right outside of Summerlin. They do an awesome job and has a high selection of bourbons and whiskeys.
What's your favorite guilty pleasure food?
Oh my gosh. My favorite guilty pleasure is a package of Oreos from the grocery store. That's what man.
That's what you eat when you are back home after like the 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning.
1 o'clock in the morning, it's Oreo cookies and Ruffles potato chips. Yes.
Okay.
Something about sweet and salty, man. I love it.
Okay, very
and
cool.
I'm double fisting on top of
that. What's the 3 cookbooks that inspired you the most?
Marcus Samuelsson, Red Rooster, Kitchen Confidential by the late, and it's not a cookbook, but it's a biography. I love Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. Made me think more about how I wanted to be a chef. And can't think of the name of the cookbook. It's by Alton Brown. It's his first one, and I actually got that book signed. I love his scientific and his easy approach to cooking. I can't think of the name of it right now, but that was one of my favorites, and I still reference that book to this day.
What's your biggest pet peeves in the kitchen?
Biggest pet peeves is people that are lazy and don't move around. I despise when I'm walking in the kitchen, somebody's in front of me walking slow, because that tells me that you don't have an actual go to get to do something. And we're always on the go and we move very rapidly fast, and that drives me insane.
Okay. Last question. Beside like the classics, mayo, ketchup, and all of this, what condiments, spice, or sauces do you like to have on hand at home?
You must be all in my genre, because I do not like ketchup. I do not like ketchup. Jalapeno aioli, garlic aioli, and ranch is at the top of my list.
Okay. Chef, thank you so much, for being, on the show. I was really excited to, to have you on. I hope you had a good time. And I hope that we'll have the opportunity to meet face to face, when the situation of the pandemic will be like to whatever the new norm is going to be.
Absolutely. I had a great time. And I look forward to meeting you and having some bourbon and whiskey and cigars,
absolutely,
and steaks.
and a cigar as well. Yes, very good. I hope you enjoy this episode with Chef Lamar Moore, and I cannot wait to fly out to Vegas, taste his food, and enjoy a bourbon and a cigar with him. If you like today's episode, please share it with a chef or with a food enthusiast. And please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Flavors Unknown. Again, today I want to give a shout out to a great forum on Facebook. This is a Facebook group called the Learning Chefs. They are done by chefs and for chefs, and they have a lot of educational resources for chefs. So please check it out. I see you in 2 weeks, and until then, remember that people who love to eat are always the best people.
You've just enjoyed another delicious episode of Flavors Unknown. Hungry for more? Hit subscribe. Tell us where you're listening from by leaving a review. And for social media and show notes, head to flavorsunknown.com.